Senator Sampson, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam President. I rise in strong support of the amendment that is on the board. I want to thank my good colleague, Senator Fazio, for his very illustrative remarks and the detail in which he went into what exactly this package of tax relief offers the residents of Connecticut. I'm tempted to get into the conversation about why we're here today and whether or not the majority's bill that is being offered is truly worthy of being emergency certified, but I will reserve those remarks for a separate conversation. Right now, I just want to speak very much in favor of what has been identified as the true emergency facing Connecticut residents, and that is the lack of affordability of living in the state of Connecticut. Everyone within the sound of my voice recognizes that Connecticut is one of the most difficult places to survive financially in our entire country, maybe only challenged by California, which is an entirely different type of entity. And I have a good friend, Senator Fazio, who likes to say that while Hawaii and Alaska are detached from the continental U.S., California is detached from reality. And I always think that's a great comment and so true. But Connecticut is also detached from reality, And it's become more and more detached as the majority party has been reelected year after year, now culminating in decades of one-party rule in the state of Connecticut, whereby policies are advanced that continue to grow the size and scope of government and the cost to the people that live here. Enough is enough. The bill that is before us is a collection of, 17 or 20 individual items, not a single which, and I would challenge anyone to prove to me that any of them rise to the level of an emergency, particularly when we are in the middle of the legislative session. In fact, we're at the very beginning, where bills are just being raised as concepts, where there are public hearings going on almost every day. I was in 3 public hearings simultaneously yesterday, including one in labor, where the labor items that are in this bill could have been addressed. What really matters right now, what the real emergency facing the people of Connecticut is affordability and their ability to be able to survive in the state of Connecticut. This amendment would create an unbelievably large reduction in the tax burden that Connecticut residents face. I just want to state for a second, that we heard over the last couple of years that the Lamont administration passed a $500 million tax cut. And I disagreed with that statement when it happened. I said so on this floor. And the reason why I did is because at a time when you are putting forth a budget that increases spending to the tune of billions of dollars, huge percentages increase in spending, it is very hard for me to understand how you could call that a tax cut. You might be adjusting a rate here or there, but ultimately, if the state of Connecticut is spending more money, that money comes to the state in the form of taxes. So taxes definitely went up. Also contained within that supposed $500 million tax cut was a huge portion of that money dedicated to the earned income tax credit. And that money is not a tax cut at all. That is a entitlement payment, effectively. It is almost like welfare. It is the state government using taxpayer dollars that they've collected from taxpayers around the state, and they're giving it back to another group of people, in some cases who have not even paid taxes at all. That is not a tax cut. That is a welfare program on the back of other taxpayers. And to say it's a tax cut is absurd. This plan is a genuine tax cut. And it is a direct result of our ability to provide a tax cut because of the massive overcollection of revenue in the form of taxes levied by this majority party. Our tax plan would eliminate the car tax, not by the way that the majority has proposed doing it over the last several years, which would effectively shift the property taxes folks back in their towns pay on cars over to homeowners by simply changing how a town is going to collect the same money. Ours does it in a totally different way. It still allows the town to collect those dollars to run their town budgets, but we would use the state's over collection of taxes to provide a tax credit against your income tax for those property taxes paid on your car, effectively eliminating your car tax that you pay to your municipality. A far better plan that is not some mischievous shift in responsibility. It's an actual tax cut. We also intend on reducing the income tax burden for state residents by $1 billion. $1 billion. And that's a 40% reduction for single filers making $50,000 and joint filers at around $100,000. Then there's also another reduction for single filers that are making $100,000 or more. So we are providing tax relief across the board, but focusing it on the people that are being hit the hardest, which is people that are middle income, hardworking folks all across the state who are being asked constantly to take more and more money out of their pockets. There's also, as Senator Fazio mentioned, relief for people that are working in industries that require occupational licenses. Think about it. Why are we making it more difficult for someone to become a HVAC professional or to be a teacher or a realtor or even a speech and language pathologist? Why are we asking these folks to pay a license fee for the privilege of going to work? We should make it easier for people to go to work, to start a small business, or to enter into an industry and make a living at it. And so we would like to eliminate the occupational license fees for various professions. And then finally, the other last part of this is a reduction in the payroll tax that was imposed on us on a party line vote by the majority a few years ago by the creation of the paid family leave benefit. And of course, that's a program that probably does provide benefits to some people in need, but it should not be a mandate. It should not have been applied to every person working in the state, whether they wanted to or not. That is a 0.5% of your income that is being taxed and put into this program, whether you want it or not, whether you have your own mechanism to take care of yourself in a case where you might need a benefit that is similar to that. This is not necessary. And in fact, as was pointed out by the good senator, we are collecting so much more in tax revenue than is actually needed that there's a massive surplus in that program also, to the point where almost every day when I get in the car, I hear another radio ad trying to advertise to people just how easy it is to get benefits from this program. That's an absurdity. The thing should never have been passed to begin with, in my view. People who want to purchase insurance products should be ready and able to do so, but they should not be mandated by the state of Connecticut against the will of the individuals. Not to mention the fact that that program has completely undermined the short-term disability insurance industry. The fact of the matter is the state of Connecticut is flush with money right now. And the reason why it's flush with money is because the majority is taxing you too much. They're collecting too much of your money in too many different ways. They brought us here on the opening day of session, which is normally just a day where it's more pomp and circumstance and celebratory than anything else. But no, not this year. They brought us here this year so they could find a way to take hundreds of millions of dollars in another emergency certified bill with no public hearings and no input and no committee debate, to find a way to empower the governor by effectively giving him a blank check to spend hundreds of millions of your tax dollars. What we want to do is we want to go back to using the legislature the way it was intended, with public input, with a legislative process that makes sense, with actual committee meetings where the members debate the merits of legislation. And what we want to do is we want to find ways to make it easier and better to live in Connecticut. I don't like the idea of even offering an amendment on today's bill because I don't think we should be here doing this. We should not be circumventing the legislative process. But since the majority has brought us here under this grand claim that there's an emergency, let's remember what the real emergency is. The real emergency is whether or not our neighbors can afford to live in our state. I have constituents reaching out to me nearly every day, struggling to make decisions about whether they're going to pay for their medication or their electric bill. I'm talking about senior citizens. I'm talking about veterans. Recently, I met with a senior citizen who lives in my district who called me over to his house for an entirely different issue, but in the conversation, I learned that this man is struggling to have his boiler serviced, to pay for his medication. He lost his wife recently. This is a gentleman who's a veteran. He was very proud to say that he's never taken one nickel of government assistance, that he has paid his way his whole life. And now he is faced with maybe losing his home because his property taxes continue to rise every year. His responsibilities continue to rise. This is a guy who bought his house probably 4 decades ago. The amount he paid for his house is probably only slightly more than his annual tax bill now. That is not right. Something must be done about it. And our amendment is the first step in doing something about it. It's about taking the fact that the state of Connecticut is now holding on to taxpayers' money it doesn't need to because they've collected too much and finding ways to give it back. On opening day, we offered an amendment as Senate Republicans to actually take the $330 million that the governor was granted in the form of a blank check. We offered an amendment to just give it back to the taxpayers as a rebate. No, failed on a party line vote. And we're about to take another vote right now, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to vote right now on whether or not we're going to provide more than $1 billion of actual tax relief to the Connecticut citizens who are struggling because this state is so unaffordable when the state is flush with money. We're going to take that vote. And it's a very simple vote. If you think affordability is the real emergency in Connecticut that ought to be addressed and that people deserve to have some of their money come back to them, then you vote yes. If you think that the state should be spending money on new projects and expanding government with complete and utter disregard for how people are struggling, well, I guess then you vote no. And I encourage the people watching to pay very close attention to the board at the end of this vote, and you will know who's on your side to make Connecticut more affordable or not. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, please give us the tally, sir.
Senate Amendment A, Senate Bill 298, total number voting 36, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 0.
Amendment fails.
I rise in strong support of the amendment that is on the board. I want to thank my colleague, Senator Perillo, for bringing out this very important amendment that I think addresses the true emergency that we've already discussed here in the state of Connecticut, which is not the contents of the underlying bill that we are debating, but rather the ability of people in our state to be able to afford to live here. And one of the most hardest hit segments of our population are senior citizens. Do you know that across America, there are states that do not tax income from Social Security? Of course, Connecticut is not one of them, but Connecticut should be one of them. One of the very first bills I put in when I first was elected to the state house, and I've been putting it in every year as a proposal, is to eliminate the tax on all retirement income, on Social Security, on pensions, everything else. And the reason for that is very simple. We want people to not only live here, to work here, to raise a family here, but we also want them to be able to retire in the great state of Connecticut. But sadly, many Connecticut residents are being forced to leave their hometowns after living a whole life in Connecticut. There are people that are now faced with a local tax burden in the form of property taxes, income taxes on Social Security income, and everything else costing so much in the state of Connecticut, including energy prices, that they can no longer sustain a life in Connecticut. It's one of the saddest things that you can think of, is that people that have lived their whole life here, who've contributed to what Connecticut is, that they feel that they're better off moving to South Carolina or Florida or some other place just because of the cost of living. That is a tragedy, Madam President, and it's one that we can fix right here and right now. Very simply, this amendment eliminates the income tax on Social Security income, which would create a situation where so many senior citizens in our state would have just a little extra layer of security in the amount of money that they have to live on each month. That might be the difference of them being able to retire and live out their years in our beautiful state. I can't imagine why there's such a strong impediment, particularly for when you put it in the terms of our entire state budget, a relatively small amount of money. This should have happened a long, long time ago. And I'm proud to stand here in support of this amendment with my Republican colleagues. We believe that this is the way to go to address the real emergency that people in Connecticut are facing. Think about people that even work for the state of Connecticut. They're being compensated out of the tax dollars that everyone here pays. But then they take their retirement income that they get in the form of a pension or something to another state. And why would they do that? It's because it's not affordable to live here. We can take a small step towards fixing that with this amendment. This is addressing the real emergency people are facing. And I don't think too many people are facing it in more significant a way than the senior citizens that live in every one of our towns. Let's help them. Another very straightforward, short amendment, an up or down vote. If you believe we should eliminate the tax on Social Security income and help seniors live in Connecticut and make it a little bit more affordable for them, you vote yes. If you don't think that matters, if you think collecting that relatively small amount of money helps our state budget, but is a huge amount of money to these individuals, then you vote no, I guess. I want the people of Connecticut to watch this board closely and know who's on what side of that issue. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. Will you remark further on the amendment? Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Can we stand at ease for a moment?
We will stand at ease. Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise and urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. And again, welcome my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to the affordability agenda that Senate Democrats have put forward. And this is a part of our Senate Bill 1, which we will work to enact later this session with our budget adjustments, and would hope that at that time when that vote is taken, it will be a bipartisan vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Duff. Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, a roll call vote has been requested. The board is open. Mr. Clerk.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment C of Senate Bill number 298. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment C. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment C of Senate Bill number 298. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment C of Senate Bill number 298.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, would you kindly give us the tally on the amendment, sir?
Senate Amendment C, Senate Bill 298, total number voting 36, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 0.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the legislation? Senator Sampson. Yes, Senator Sampson, you have the floor, and I will ask our Senate colleagues if they would please direct their attention to you, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good to see you up there. I rise in strong opposition to the legislation before us, not particularly because of the content of the legislation itself, although there are items which I think run the full gamut of passable, terrible, and maybe somewhere in between. I rise primarily to discuss the process that we are being faced with today, or maybe better to say lack of process. I don't know if the people in this chamber are aware that today is the...
Senator Sampson, I'm just going to stop you for one moment because we're going to get the amendment off the board. There you, and we'll let you continue. Sorry about that. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Once again, I rise in opposition to the bill before us. Earlier, we heard the minority leader of the state Senate, Senator Harding, make a very, very important statement about how the proceedings today do not follow the typical order of this legislature or any legitimate legislature in history, in my view. What's going on is something I like to refer to as convenience government. The fact is that the majority fully knows, they know in their hearts and their minds that they are not following the process as designed. Everyone knows what that process is. Bills are proposed by individual lawmakers, maybe at the request of their constituents. Those bills are assigned to various committees. Those committees meet, they debate the subject. The public is invited to comment on those bills. There is a process by which things are changed, improved, and ultimately after that process, and only after that process is completed, do bills end up in the House or Senate chamber for a final up or down vote, and then potentially off to the governor to be signed into law. What we're witnessing today is a complete undermining of that process. None of that is happening today. There are no public hearings for the items that are on this agenda. If someone says there's a public hearing, well, it was probably a public hearing that happened a year ago on something similar. That's not the same thing. It was also noted that we are in the middle of the legislative session. It's not uncommon, although almost as inappropriate, for the majority to bring us in when we're not in session for a special session to pass emergency certified legislation as well. But here we are, totally different story. There are hearings going on almost every day in this legislature. Just yesterday, I was in 3 public hearings in 3 committees. Some of these very items could have been addressed by those committees, and yet they were not. It makes one wonder why it is the majority feels the need to put a stamp on legislation, to put a whole bunch of items together that are completely unrelated, and then call it an emergency when in fact no one can justify that. I defy anyone in this chamber to get up and explain to me how any one of these items is a true emergency for the people of Connecticut. It's just not. I started to say that today is the 1-year anniversary of a similar bill. If you go back to February 25th, 2025, 1 year ago today, we were brought in here for a similar purpose to pass another emergency certified bill. That one was similar in some ways, and it was chock full of earmarks to non-government organizations, some of them of questionable integrity. At least at the time that we were voting on it, no one could identify where that money was going or who these organizations were. There were exceptions, of course. There were some legitimate organizations on the list, like Boys and Girls Clubs and the Jewish Federation. But then there were other items that to this day I still can't identify where that tax dollars of the people I represent have gone off to. That bill also contained a plethora of political items, including a way to take a slap at the President of the United States about ICE entering schools, something that was not going on at the time in Connecticut, didn't go on before that, hasn't gone on since. But yet, a political bill with earmarks, emergency certified, no legislative process was brought before us back on February 25th of last year. And here we are again, doing the same kind of thing. And in my view, fake emergency bills designed to circumvent the legislative process should not have an anniversary. It's almost like it's earmarks giving. And that's something that should not become a reality. This is becoming a pattern. It's happened a few times over the years. I remember during the pandemic, coming in here every month or so for a special session as the governor extended his emergency powers. Another entirely unjustified action, but same situation, complete and utter disregard for the legislative process and for common decency. But now we have a pattern. We have a pattern where this majority doesn't feel the need to go through the process anymore. And they're almost always the same. You have a massive omnibus bill that's chock full of whatever random items that people feel the need to put in there because they don't want to go through the legislative process. They don't want to deal with the public or the committee debate where there's possibility for change or for an opposition or an advocacy organization to speak up and maybe put pressure on preventing something from happening. No, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more convenient to go ahead and do it as an emergency certified bill. This also means that we in the minority have almost no time to review these items. I got the legislation that is before us last night at 10:42 p.m. That's what time the email came in to me. And I stayed up for a few hours trying to make heads or tails out of it. But there was one bill for 121 pages, mostly about topics that I'm not really familiar with, and another separate bill, I think was around 30 or 40 pages, which we will hear later on today. But this does not afford the minority, the public, the media. The people of Connecticut deserve better. They deserve to be able to know what is going on in their legislature. That's how our system works, folks. The great thing about this beautiful and wonderful country we live in, if there's one key ingredient, it is representative government. It is the fact that the people have the power. They elect each of us to come here and represent them. In my view, representing my constituents means being honest with them, speaking truth to them about what is happening and what we're voting on, and truly representing their interests by being informed about what is happening so that I can make intelligent decisions about how to vote on the policy of the state of Connecticut. That cannot happen under emergency certification. And sure, we have rules that allow for emergency certification. Those rules are there for a reason. But the reason is not convenience, Madam President. The reason is a natural disaster, a financial collapse, something that any person on the street would recognize as an actual emergency, a disaster where the legislature has to convene immediately to make something happen, to direct funds, to save people's lives, to rebuild infrastructure, something like that. Not to play games with the budget and come up with some earmarks for some non-government organizations, or to make minor changes to school construction rules, or to create education mandates, or to add more regulation onto warehouse workers in the state of Connecticut, driving up the cost of doing business here, potentially putting businesses out of business, or at least workers out of a job, only to be replaced by robots. Making a change so that a specific person can actually continue a job as a chief court administrator. Or to challenge the federal government's desire to have a copy of our voter registration list so that they can track legal immigration. That's the things that are in the underlying bill, ladies and gentlemen. Do any of those sound like emergencies? Certainly, any one of those things could be worthy of a conversation. They're certainly worthy of a public hearing where the people can weigh in and decide whether these things have value and whether a policy should be adopted for them. But these are not emergencies. There's no national disaster. The reason why this is happening, the reason why the majority is doing this, is because they can. Because they can. Because they can. And you know why they can? They can because, sadly, there is not enough pressure being brought to bear by the people of this state, the news media that's watching this Senate session, to hold this government accountable to the people and their responsibility to do representation as intended. They are getting away with this, in my view, because they can. having one party in power for literal decades, where they get to take advantage of the rules in every conceivable way, in fact, ignore the rules on a consistent basis. I could make your hair curl talking about the things that I have witnessed in this legislature because they can. Because not enough people are coming out and saying, you know, that's not right. You know, if you're going to pass a bill on this, you need to have a hearing. People need to be aware of what is happening. We need to debate this thoroughly. As long as folks are being elected and re-elected by ignoring the legislative process, ignoring a substantial portion of the population because they're represented by Republicans, as long as that continues, they will continue to do this because they can. I'm begging my colleagues to recognize that this is not to anyone's benefit. Politics over time changes. There is going to be a shift someday. Can't happen soon enough for me, but there's going to be a shift someday, and the parties in power might change. And what will be the terrible, terrible effect of that is that the precedent will already be set. That the majority party, whoever that is on any given day, can utterly ignore the will of the people, the will of the minority, any sense of reason or justice, and do things because they can. That's the tragedy in all of this. And frankly, I don't want to serve in a majority like that. If I served in a majority, I would still have respect for the fact that the people that I disagree with in the minority on some issues are represented by people, and they were put there for a purpose, and that their voice has value. But unfortunately, all I've got today is my voice. Let's see how much value it has. When you have an emergency certified bill with no basis of an emergency, effectively the majority can put anything they want in it. In some sense, I consider myself lucky that there's not more items in this bill that I take objection to. There are some that I certainly take objection to. There is a section I mentioned about warehouse workers. This is a bill that's been around in this legislature for the last several years that is going to do a significant amount of damage to several industries. Companies that actually employ people that work in warehouses as personnel. This could be something, you know, like Amazon, or it could be a big box store like a Costco, or it could even be a delivery company like a FedEx or a UPS. And you know what happens when you start to put this additional burdensome regulation on these companies? They make choices. And some of the choices they make do not benefit the people of Connecticut. I mean, they can move. They can just say, you know what? We're not going to put our facility in Connecticut anymore. We're not going to choose to put our next facility there. We might take the facility we have and move it to a different state. As long as I've been in this legislature, I have been watching companies leave Connecticut. I can't recall the last time there was a giant front page story about a company coming to Connecticut. I've watched lots of them leave, though. I've watched this governor and the previous governor try and keep companies. You can just name them: GE, Alexion, Pharmaceutical. I mean, you name all the companies, the first five, all the various corporate welfare efforts that have gone on over the years to try and keep these companies in Connecticut. But you know what? They continue to exit instead of enter. And the reason why is because of policies like this. This is a bill that was vetoed by the governor. And you're going to bring it back, and you're going to put it in an emergency certified bill while there's hearings going on, while there was a labor committee public hearing yesterday that this bill could have been on the agenda? Talk about disrespecting the process and everybody involved in it. It's an absurdity. There's another bill, the pension offset bill. I don't know what section it is off the top of my head. This is a lot to make heads or tails out of in short order. But this is a situation where you have another bill that has been debated in this legislature for at least the last 5 sessions, possibly more. I serve as a ranking member of the Labor Committee, and I've been involved in those debates. This is a bill that effectively undermines collective bargaining by taking away the right of labor unions to determine what benefits they wish to negotiate for with municipalities. So it hurts them. And guess what? It also hurts the taxpayers. Because ultimately what it does is it awards the employee side of the negotiation in a contract with a municipality benefits that they didn't have before, which will ultimately mean more property taxes for every citizen of this state. Of course, they don't want to debate that. They don't want to have a public hearing about that conversation. Nobody wants to talk about, this might have an impact on property taxes. Why would you want to do that? Whole lot easier, whole lot more convenient to slap it in an emergency certified bill and pass it, isn't it? And that's what's going on here. It's all about convenience. It's all about, that old legislative process, boy, it's awful clunky. We'd have to actually listen to people. We'd have to get their opinions on things. People might disagree over it. Boy, would that be terrible to have to put up with that. It's a whole lot easier to just slam it through. Oh, emergency certified. Bang the gavel. Madam President, I have a few questions about the first few sections of the bill regarding what is referred to as budget provisions and some dollar amounts that are being afforded to various entities. Who can I ask these questions to?
I think that would be Senator Austin, so we may have to stand at ease while we find her to do that. So we'll stand at ease. Senator Sampson, proceed, and Senator Austin, prepare yourself. We'll get your microphone on. There you go.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So the very few first sections of this bill are labeled budget provisions. And if I can actually just find the page of my document where I have all this. Okay. I think it starts on page 2. There are, in the very first few sections, something that we refer to as earmarks, which are effectively set-asides. These are dollar amounts that are just named in a bill, typically a budget bill, but they can also show up in an emergency certified bill that is circumventing the budget process, like today. And these are items where we're just directing money. The sum of X amount of dollars will be given to X entity. And this is something that we've come accustomed to, unfortunately, in recent years, where the majority is placing these earmarks in emergency certified bills or even in a budget without any public hearing process ahead of time. Now, normally, I would say that if you were trying to do legislation the right way, before the state of Connecticut awarded someone's tax money, the people back home that I represent, we ought to tell them exactly who this entity is and why we're giving them the money, who asked for the money. They should know these things, right? But when you just stick it in an emergency certified bill, there's only one chance to get any of that information, and that's right now. Right now is the only chance we're going to have. There's no hearing. This was never put before any committee. It's just now is our chance to ask these questions. So I just want to ask, and I want to state for the record that not all of these are necessarily bad things. Some of these items go to perfectly legitimate companies, organizations, boys and girls clubs I mentioned. That's fine. I got no issue with that, although I do believe that they should still go through the process. We should know what the money is going to be used for. We should know which lawmakers have asked for it and why. There should be some mechanism to audit those dollars to make sure they're actually used for that purpose, right? So a number of these items are enumerated on the first few pages of the bill. And the first one I want to ask about is in Section 6. And it's simply because I don't know what this organization is. This is on lines 28 through 31 of the bill. It says the sum of $70,000 is appropriated to the Judicial Department under other expenses, and it shall be made available for a grant to the Village Initiative Project. So through you, Madam President, can I ask the good chairman of the Appropriations Committee what this organization is, where it's located, who's asked for this grant, and what is the purpose of the money, the $70,000? Through you.
And through you, this is the Village Initiative Project is a college prep program that is located in Bridgeport. It clarifies the intent that $70,000 previously appropriated through the judicial branch's OE line must be granted to the Village Initiative Project. So this is clarifying language for something that happened last year in the biennial budget to clarify that this program is by this name located in Bridgeport and that it is a college preparatory program. Through you, Madam President. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the good chairman of the Appropriations Committee for that answer. But can I have the rest of the information too? Which is who asked for this particular item to appear in today's document, and what is this money going to be used for? I know you said a college preparatory program, but is it for a salary for someone who's helping assist college preparation, or is it for scholarships? What's it for? Through you.
No idea who asked for this to be in today's document. It is not something that I am privy with, and relative to what this program will use it for is to get more students to go through the college preparatory program in Bridgeport. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I don't mean to be a pill. I really don't. But when the purpose is to get more people to go through this college preparatory program, that's not really an answer. What is the money used for? How are we going to get more students to go through this program? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Austin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And through you, the program will then have more resources available to allow more students to come through their program. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Hey, forgive me, this is a very uncomfortable position to be in. I will let folks who are watching know that I'm asking questions, and I have a lot of respect for my colleague. But clearly, I don't think she knows the real answer to the question I'm asking, which is why I'm getting kind of a circular answer about, well, it's to help this program. Well, it's to aid more in helping the program. It's not, Senator, this money is going to be used to pay a salary for an individual whose day-to-day operation would include XYZ. That's what I need. I want the people who are watching, and they should be watching this in a public hearing through the legislative process, but instead we're doing it on the Senate floor today. But the people deserve to know what this is. They should be able to judge whether this is good or bad. And also, importantly, I should be able to judge whether it's good or bad. Madam President, I have to vote on this. I have to decide whether this is something legitimate to vote yes on or no. How do I do that when I can't know the information? What's even more concerning is how can people that are in the majority that put this bill together vote on it? Maybe you have to care about what's actually in the bill to be concerned about whether or not it's a good expenditure. Let's just move on to the next one. How about this? This is interesting. And I want to just make a clarification. I know the good chairman mentioned that this item was contained in the budget, but it was contained in the budget in other vague terms and for an entirely different amount. And to this day, no one's actually discussed on the record in any way, shape, or form how that money is going to be used in any specificity that could matter to anyone. And this is a similar item. This is Section 7, and this is another, we're grabbing from the other expenses line of the Office and Policy Management, $2.5 million. And I know that this was already stated to be $3.2 million or something in a budget document previously. But that still begs the question, $2.5 million shall be made available, get this folks, for outdoor recreation in the city of Hartford. So through you, Madam President, I would like the same questions. Who is asking for this? I don't think we got that on the last one. Who is asking? Which lawmaker? Who in this room? There's 36 senators. This didn't appear magically. Someone asked for it. Who was that? And what's this money going to be used for? $2.5 million for outdoor recreation. I mean, are we buying people basketballs or tennis rackets? I mean, it's a lot of basketballs. $2.5 million of taxpayer money people work very hard for that comes out of their paychecks. Through you, Madam President, can I just ask, who sponsored this? What is the money for? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Austin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Again, I don't know who sponsored this particular dollar amount, but outdoor recreation in the city of Hartford, this helps cover the costs of students to attend outdoor recreation, allowing them to attend programs all summer long. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I hope that people who are watching are listening very carefully to my questions and the answers. Are the answers in line with my questions? Is there enough specificity there to satisfy anyone of where $2.5 million tax dollars are going to vanish off to in some black hole? I don't think so. I'm just curious, through you, Madam President, you said you weren't certain who asked for this. Who makes the decision of whether it actually ends up in this document? Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Austin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I believe that there were questions from agencies on where certain dollars were going, and so I believe that this is an answer to some of those questions. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm not having a good batting average here. I think I would be certainly sent back to the minors based on how I'm getting as far as my answers to my questions, but I'm going to try one more. There are a number of these items, but I think folks that are watching get the picture, but we'll just ask one more for the heck of it. Section 11 of the bill, and of course, we didn't have to dig far. I think I'm on page 2 of a 121-page document. This says that $330,000 from the Department of Economic Development from their other expenses line should go to a grant to an organization called Our Piece of the Pie. $330,000 is a pretty sizable piece of pie in my view, and I would love to know exactly who this organization is, who asked for this particular earmark, what the money will be used for. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Austin.
I'm sorry, Madam President.
We can have Senator Sampson.
Could you please just give me the Reader's Digest version of what you just said? Which question were you asking again, sir? I apologize.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd be delighted to repeat the question. I'm now on page 2 of the 121-page document under Section 11, which specifies that $330,000 hard-earned dollars taken in the form of taxation from the residents of Connecticut will be used to go to provide a grant to an organization called Our Piece of the Pie. And I'd just be curious what this organization is, what activities are they involved in, who, once again, asked for this legislation, and finally, how is this money going to be used? Through you.
Senator Austin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Our Piece of the Pie is a youth service organization. It's actually been in many parts of the state. Right now, it is mostly in the Hartford area. It's a youth services organization. It works with a lot of at-risk youth to get them through and sometimes educational shortfalls that they may be having. They used to be down in Norwich. They don't happen to be down in Norwich anymore, but they used to be in Norwich. And this $330,000 is to extend programming to other youth in the Hartford area, serving the greater Hartford region. And so sort of to talk about the question that's relative to who, when, where did this come from, this is looking at questions that agencies have had for our biennial budget, and those items could have come from the governor's office, they could have come from the House, they could have come from the Senate. So I don't know exactly where these individual items came from on any one of these. questions through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I think that was very informative. Well, maybe it was very instructive rather than informative. I mean, we know that this organization, Our Piece of the Pie, was no longer in Norwich. That was very helpful. We don't know where they're located now, though, do we? Through you, Madam President?
Senator Austin.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam President. They're in the Hartford region, Hartford and the surrounding communities. They serve students in the surrounding communities based in Hartford, through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to just quickly pause and say I mean no disrespect to the recipients of these dollars, by the way. They may do tremendous work. You know, the question is not whether or not these are legitimate items, although that question has come up. And I think it's going to come up a whole lot more as we begin to dig into these a little bit more thoroughly. But the issue is not whether they are actually doing good work. It's about whether or not we know what the heck they're doing before we cast a vote. Whether we've actually done our homework, whether we've actually represented our constituents. That representation requires that we know, in my view. I don't like to cast votes on legislation I've not seen. If anyone's followed me over the years, I make a big stink when we are given legislation moments before we are requested to vote on it. And this is a similar situation. I got this bill last night. This is the first time I've ever heard of Our Piece of the Pie. And now I'm being asked to vote yes or no about giving them $330,000. These might be the most magnificent people in all of America, but I don't know that. We also were informed that the money was requested for this organization by maybe someone in the House, or maybe someone in the Senate, maybe someone from the moon. We don't know. You've got no answer. And again, no disrespect to my colleague, but that's not good enough. That is not good enough. Before any money comes from the hardworking people that I represent back home, and that's Republicans and Democrats, that's everybody. They deserve to know how we're spending it. They need to know who asked for it, who approved it, what it's for, in some element of detail other than, well, it's being used for good, Senator, we promise. Because we've been down this road so many times in recent years, this is almost like a repeat of last February 25th as I started my remarks. In fact, if you want to go on YouTube and go watch the debate from February 25th of 2025 about earmarks, you're going to hear me asking a lot of the same questions and complaining that I'm not getting the answers. We've also held several press conferences in this building in front of the media explaining our dissatisfaction with the lack of answers and the concern over the fact that this money could not be used for corrupt purposes. Did that make sense? Could be used for corrupt purposes? Could not be? You get the picture. We don't know what it's being used for. And the fact of the matter is we deserve to know. But you see, the majority, frankly, they don't care. They didn't matter that I questioned this last time. It didn't matter that we held several press conferences. It doesn't matter that we're here today making a big argument over it. It doesn't matter. It's only going to matter when the people of Connecticut are tired of it. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't. I hope it happens today. It should have happened a long time ago in my mind. People need to start caring about what their representatives are doing, and guess what? When that happens, those representatives are going to care about what those people think. Until then, they're going to do things like this because they can. So with that, Madam President, I'm going to make an effort to improve this situation. The clerk is in possession of an amendment. It's LCO 2258. I ask that the clerk call this amendment, and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 2258, Senate Amendment D.
Thank you. Senator, let's get it on the board, and then Senator Sampson, you may proceed as soon as we have the amendment number. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This amendment is entitled, well, actually, the amendment title is the same as the bill title. I apologize. We refer to this as our earmark improvement amendment inside the Senate Republican caucus. It's designed to prevent corruption. It's designed to improve transparency. It's designed to allow the people of Connecticut to make sure that they have the necessary information about what is happening in their state government. I will just briefly go through some of the requirements that are going to be initiated with this amendment, which is that if there are future earmark requests similar to the ones we've been talking about, the information will have to be submitted by the member of this legislature asking for it to the Appropriations Committee with a written request that includes the amount of funds requested, the necessity for those amounts that are requested, a clear description of the public purpose for which this money is being used. And I'll just make a side note that some of my concern is that I feel that some of this money is being directed to organizations that are not using it for a public purpose. They may, in fact, be using it for political advocacy, which would be a complete and utter misuse of taxpayer money. That request should also include the requester, the person who's actually asking for it. It's one of the biggest concerns I have is that the few items that I asked the good chairman about, we did not find out who actually asked for this money. There's an investigation going on right now about a similar earmark that may result in some sort of significant, I don't know what to refer to it as, a finding of fact in a court of law is probably the safest thing I could say at this point. But there's a concern over who's asking for these things to determine whether or not they're actually being directed or misdirected. We don't want that. And there should also be a certification by that person requesting it that they, their family members, or in any business which they are associated have no financial interest in where this money is being directed. There's going to be a requirement that there will be a public hearing associated with each one of these requests. And if a third party recipient receives the funds, ultimately not the person necessarily listed, then they have to enter into an actual contract that states the provisions, which are identical to everything that we've just discussed. The grant recipients would also have to state whether or not they have any convictions of its officers or board members or anyone else associated with the organization about any financially related crimes. And finally, they would have to submit to random audits of that money to make sure that it's actually being used for the stated purpose. For me, this is the baseline of what ought to be required. This is not some tremendous overreach, digging into people's private business. This is the bare minimum of what the people I represent deserve to have before their tax money is being used and given to someone else, in my view. And with that, Madam President, I would move adoption of this amendment, and I'd ask for a roll call vote. Thank you.
Will you remark further, Senator Duff?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would urge my colleagues to vote no, though I would say that this is an area of particular interest to Senate Democrats because we are already working on legislation. And as been talked about today, this concept, there's a bill already that's moving through the process, through public hearings, and will be voted on by this chamber at some point before the legislative session ends. And I would hope that there would be a bipartisan vote on this idea as well, because it is something that is important to our caucus, this side of the aisle as well, and one that we feel does deserve to go through the process so we can hear from the public, we can hear input, we can make the idea better, and one that we feel is very important as well. So I look forward to having a strong vote when the bill makes its way through the process later on this session. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk, kindly call the vote on the amendment.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment D of Senate Bill number 298. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate on Senate Amendment D. This is not the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment D of Senate Bill number 298. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment D of Senate Bill number 298. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate.
Mr. Clerk, would you please give us the tally?
Senate Amendment D, Senate Bill 298. Total number voting 36, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 0.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the bill? Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much for the recognition, Madam President. I'm disappointed, though I have to admit I'm not surprised that we saw yet another 25-11 vote, which coincidentally is the makeup of the Senate, 25 Democrats and 11 Republicans, a party line decision once again. I appreciate Senator Duff rising to express his desire for continued work on this topic, although I find it a little bit hypocritical, frankly, and a little ironic to be saying that these are good ideas, but not right now, when in fact we're voting on an emergency certified bill that I would say maybe these are good ideas, but we should have the hearings too. So I suppose what's good for the majority is not good for anyone else. It goes back to my arguments about because they can. And I just want to close on that note, which is, emergency certification, any person on the street, and if you just told them without any direct knowledge of the legislature, just their expectation as an American citizen, knowing that they vote for people, they send them to a legislature to work on their behalf. If you just asked them and said, hey, the legislature is meeting to pass bills under what's called an emergency certification, what do you think their reaction would be if I told them that there's no natural disaster, there's no financial collapse imminent, there's no deadline for compliance with the federal government, there's no impending legal crisis, there's nothing going on. The legislature's in session, they're having other hearings and meetings like everything's going on, and these are a bunch of random bills, which, by the way, we were informed that most of these items were selected because they were items that did not materialize in the last session. In other words, they made it through the legislative process, they were voted on by one chamber or the other, but then they ultimately stalled and were not passed by the other chamber. There's only one reason why that happens, Madam President, and that is because the majority did not prioritize these items. The legislative cycle is a specified amount of time. It starts on a certain day, it ends on a date certain as well. We call it sine die. And we have a back and forth about the legislation that's going to pass every cycle. And it involves the majority party determining what their priorities are and the minority determining what our priorities are as far as what we like and what we don't like. And certainly we're going to stand in the way of legislation that we don't agree with. And sometimes we're successful in that regard by stopping what we would consider to be bad bills. Think about just how much, in defiance of the spirit of the legislative process that recognizes the minority's ability to speak and use time as its only tool for preventing the majority from advancing policy, to come back almost like a slap across the face to say, you know what? You guys were really good last session by stopping some of the bills that we wanted because we couldn't prioritize them well, or we wanted to do more than we had time for. To come back and slap it in an emergency certified bill with no hearings and just jam it through. And that's what today is, folks. It's jam it through because we can day. We should have no more jam it through because we can days, Madam President. I certainly hope that people are watching for once. Thank you.